We've had Pokemon Puzzle League, Hyrule Warriors, and the entire conglomeration of the Mario sports franchises. But what about another Nintendo spin-off game? It's the LP Podcast. Hello and happy Tuesday. It's the day of the week where I do more talking than playing of Nintendo games, but Nintendo is the topic all the same. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about a Reddit post that I came across last night, put up by Interesting Paper 41, asking for ideas for a spin-off game of any Nintendo game. Now, whether or not Interesting Paper is an undercover Nintendo employee desperately seeking out ideas for their next development project, I can't rightly say, but this topic really got the gears in my head spinning. I have long desired a number of spin-off games from Nintendo franchises that have never ended up materializing, but before we talk about what I want, let's look through this Reddit section and see exactly what everyone else threw out there. The first one here, sorted by best, is Paper Zelda. Now, this is one that I have thought of just because, as we all know, I'm a huge Paper Mario fan, I'm a huge Zelda fan. Combining the two into, a turn-based RPG sounds pretty good. To be honest with you, I can't exactly put any sort of negative spin on it. I think that's a great suggestion. Moving on to the next one, Andrew Paris says the age-old spin-off request that people have wanted for over a decade is a Pokemon MMO. Now, that's an interesting one, too. Initially, when I hear that, I think of something like Pokemon Legends, but where you're not the only player in this expansive world. There's countless whoever else is online in that world specifically you can interact with, you can trade with, you can battle. I think that's a good one. I do think that's difficult since, as they mentioned, Nintendo doesn't do well with online play, mostly because Nintendo doesn't outright prioritize it. Not in general, but kind of. Franchises like Splatoon, like Mario Kart, yes, the online experience is a big part of it, and undoubtedly if they were to ever expand into the MMO world, well, you can't have an MMO without the O. You know what I'm saying? So, I like that idea. I think it is less feasible, perhaps, than a Paper Zelda. Maybe not a Paper Zelda specifically, but a Zelda in that vein. And we'll talk about that later on. Next up, Pixie Dust Fairies. Put it simply, Bowser game. I think that's a great one. I mean, what did we have? Bowser's Fury? In part of this, would a Bowser game even be a spin-off, is my question, because if you're going to qualify it that way, then that would make Princess Peach Showtime a spin-off, and I don't think Princess Peach Showtime was much of a spin-off, really. I think it was just its own departure into its own mainline series, and if a Bowser game were to be, like puzzle-based, we talked about Pokemon Puzzle League in the intro, if it were some sort of Bowser Tetris game, then yeah, but if it's an outright Bowser adventure, an action-adventure platformer, then I'd call that less of a spin-off and more of just a departure into its own main line. Moving on, next, Sicarius mentions an action first-person shooter featuring the bounty hunters from Metroid Prime Hunters with both competitive and co-op. Okay, I'm not familiar with Metroid Prime Hunters. I mean, I know what it is. I've never actually spent any amount of time playing it, so I can't rightly comment on how that would look. A GTA-style F-Zero street racing game? Now, when you say GTA style, I don't think racing. I think something perhaps more violent. But that aside, I suppose there is some amount of street racing in GTA, so maybe that would make sense. But F-Zero is already a racing game, isn't it? And if you just change the courses, is that really a spin-off, or is that just perhaps a reskinned F-Zero or a different themed F-Zero? Now, if Nintendo bucked all trends they've ever put out there and you could take Captain Falcon and friggin' mug people, then hey, maybe, yeah, whatever. But aside from that, we shall see. An Assassin's Creed-style stealth action game revolving around the Sheikah. That's an interesting one. Just conceptually, I like it. Unfortunately, I don't think the Sheikah have enough, shall we say, like brand value or awareness to really push the needle in that direction, right? When we talk about spin-off games, I think that they almost have to be centered around like the big heavy hitters. You know what I'm saying? Like Pokemon Puzzle League or Hyrule Warriors or Mario Golf. You're not going to have like, I don't know, I mean, shoot, I guess we did have a Tingle game. I don't know. But in order for the game to drive the amount of market awareness that it needs to be profitable, to sell the copies, to justify the time and monetary expenses that they put in developing them and then pushing them out into stores, it has to be something that they would feel would really be successful. And is that the Sheikah? Do the Sheikah have that? I don't, maybe. Next up, an open Lilat system Star Fox Adventures game. Could be interesting. That one's relatively short and simple. Star Fox Adventures was a great game for the GameCube that desperately needs a sequel. But whether or not that would be a spinoff, who's to say? We have another Bowser spinoff with a naval battle game using Bowser airships. That's a good idea. That might be the best one here in this man's string of conceptualizations. It's not, maybe not like a battleship sort of tile-based game, but something strategic, right? Think maybe Advance Wars, but Bowser? I like it. All right, let's move on down to another user, Staysu 2, a game where you play as Zelda and need to rescue Link. Again, in the same vein as, what I said about Princess Peach Showtime and a hypothetical Bowser. I think that's less of a spin-off and more of just, another branch in the mainline Zelda tree. So I would love to see it. I've mentioned this a number of times that the princesses need better representation as far as protagonists. And we're glad to get Princess Peach Showtime. Hopefully more of that to come. And Princess Zelda needs her own as well. Next up, not Daryl Palumbo. I'm on to you, Daryl. Splatoon survival horror. Fascinating. Now, I'm not the biggest Splatoon guy in the world, but when I think of it just from an aesthetic perspective, it is anything but horrific. I mean, horrifically filthy, perhaps. I mean, you're spraying squid juices all over the place, so maybe that's horrifying to some people if you're allergic. I don't know. But a survival horror game invokes certain thoughts of scariness that I think are perhaps almost the antithesis of what Splatoon as a franchise invokes, because it's very colorful, right? The cute characters present an almost welcoming, if not comforting, sort of feeling. So I guess I could see that. I don't know. We're gonna say on that. Next up, we've got Hugh Jazz 24 with Falco's R-Wing Racing League. Okay, yeah, that's pretty solid. A racing Star Fox game with Falco, I suppose, is the main character. Sure, why not? Herdner, something like that. Stardew Valley-like game about being a random toad in the Mushroom Kingdom. Interesting. Okay, I could support another Toad protagonist game, right? We haven't had one since Captain Toad. And Stardew Valley-esque, while I haven't played, I do get the concept. I think that could be fun. That could be really neat. Moving on, Ice Climbers Dating Sim, Assuredly a Joke by May McKay. And Steak and Iron, JRPG set in Hyrule, Zelda's the protagonist. That's a great idea. And I suppose with Hyrule MMO being next, this is probably a good time for me to impart my own thoughts and opinions. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this thread get posted, Zelda RPG. Zelda RPG, a turn-based classic JRPG centered around the Zelda characters, right? You could have Link, Zelda. I mean, goodness gracious, look at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. You are starting to see more and more partners become a trend in Zelda games. Granted, in Breath of the Wild, they were more along the lines of abilities, but in Tears of the Kingdom, you ran around, with Yunobo and co, everyone around. And I think that taking that same sort of energy and channeling that into a JRPG would be excellent, right? I mentioned Link and Zelda, Tingle, you can recruit them. You can recruit a Goron, a Zora, Dashika, someone from the Gerudo Desert, who's to say whether they'll be antagonists or not. Maybe you can get a rogue out of there, something like that, and you can travel Hyrule and overcome probably Ganon, but some sort of vicious evil in a turn-based system where you're leveling up, you're progressing your stats, you're accumulating items and discovering which has the best build, which class you want to put onto your characters. I have long desired something like that. Hey, but maybe that's because Zelda's my favorite franchise, and then RPGs are probably my favorite genre of game aside from that. So any way that I can find to combine the two, probably pretty appealing to someone like myself. I know that we've had a number of Zelda games in the past, and they've all maintained a really consistent sort of theme. Granted, they have had some departures. We mentioned Hyrule Warriors and then Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, while mainline Zelda games are somewhat of a departure from the formula. I think that an RPG-style Zelda could really work. I really do, because the art style of Zelda already kind of lends itself to those sort of audiences, for lack of a better word, right? Because you think of games like, I don't know, like Fire Emblem, like Golden Sun playing on the channel right now. They're very Easternized, right? Almost anime-esque in a way with the art style. And so is Zelda, for that matter. And I want it. I want it. I think that would be fantastic. Now, if you put a gun to my head and force me to say, okay, LP, what about another spin-off that's not that? Well, something I've also thought about would be like a Pokemon platformer game, okay? Maybe not traditional Pokemon in the way that there is a trainer with his slate of Pokemon, but it could be. It could be. My idea is to have a grouping of Pokemon, each with their own sort of unique abilities, right? Obviously, you could have a flying type that's capable of flying. You could have a water type that's capable of using surf or something, and you overcome all the obstacles on your action-adventure platforming based on who you have, and you have to like swap out to use the power, right? Think almost like, I don't know, like a Kirby in the Forgotten Land, but instead of ingesting different enemies to gain their powers, you're just swapping out or something. Maybe it's a little rough around the edges, not the greatest idea in the world, but a Pokemon platformer I think would be really neat. Just given the wide array of, potential that it would have, especially from Pokemon being a global juggernaut as far as IPs go. I think that almost anything Pokemon-based would be successful, right? I think the same almost of Zelda, but less so. Personally, between the two, I definitely prefer the Zelda RPG, but that's just me. What about you? Do you have any other sort of spin-offs for Nintendo games you think would be neat? What about an Animal Crossing crime noir? Probably not. But, hey, anything's possible. Goodness gracious. So, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it and hope that you enjoyed yourself. And I'll see you again next Tuesday.